This is an introduction video discussion on the role of labor unions in the labor market. A discussion presented by Dr. Allain Fonte from the School of Business and Economics of Western Covenant University. This discussion is based from the book of Borjas on labor economics, published by McGraw-Hill Education in the year 2020, and from the book of Ehrenberg and Smith entitled Modern Labor Economics Theory and Public Policy, published by Routledge in 2019. What is a labor union? These groups of workers join forces to fight for better pay, benefits, and working conditions. It's like a group project, but instead of a diorama of the rainforest, they're building a better life for themselves. Labor unions have been around for ages, fighting for workers' rights since the days when bosses could make you work 16-hour days in a coal mine. Unions are all about collective bargaining, which is just a fancy way of saying they negotiate with employers on behalf of all the workers. Think of it like this: it's much harder to ignore a crowd of angry workers than just one lone voice. Unions have achieved some incredible things over the years. They've fought for safer workplaces, better pay, and even weekends. They're a crucial part of ensuring that workers get a fair shake, and we're going to explore just how they do it. So, buckle up, because we're about to take a deep dive into the world of labor unions and how they're shaping the way we get paid. Alright, let's get down to brass tacks. To understand how wages are determined, we need to talk about supply and demand. You know that thing you learned in Econ 101 and promptly forgot? Don't worry, we've got you covered. In the simplest terms, the supply of labor is how many people are willing to do a certain job. The demand for labor is how many people employers want to hire. Just like with any product, the price of labor, also known as wages, is determined by where these two forces meet. But here's the catch: it's not always a level playing field. Sometimes employers have way more power than workers. Think about it. If you're the only game in town for a certain job, you can pretty much dictate the terms. That's where unions come in. They help to balance the scales by giving workers more leverage in the negotiation process. And it's not just about supply and demand. Other factors like education, skills, and even discrimination can influence wages. Minimum wage laws also play a role, setting a floor for how low wages can go. It's a complicated system, but understanding these basic principles is key to understanding the impact of unions. Let's face it, the relationship between workers and employers can be a bit like a seesaw. Sometimes it's balanced, but other times one side has way more weight. That's where unions come in, like a trusty friend who sits on your end of the seesaw and helps you even things out. Historically, unions emerged as a response to some pretty terrible working conditions. We're talking about dangerous factories, child labor, and wages so low you could barely afford a loaf of bread. Unions gave workers a united voice and the power to demand better treatment. And it worked. Over the years, unions have fought tirelessly for safer workplaces, reasonable working hours, and fair compensation. They've helped to establish basic labor rights that we often take for granted today, like the 40-hour work week and paid overtime. But it's not just about history. Unions are still relevant today, especially in industries where workers might otherwise be taken advantage of. Think about industries with a lot of low-wage, physically demanding jobs. Unions are there to fight for those workers and make sure they're treated with dignity and respect. So, how exactly do unions manage to secure better wages and benefits for their members? It all comes down to collective bargaining, which is really just a fancy term for negotiation. Imagine this: instead of each worker having to negotiate their own salary and benefits package, the union steps in and negotiates on behalf of everyone. It's like having a professional negotiator in your corner fighting for the best possible deal. Of course, it's not always easy. Negotiations can be tough, with both sides vying for the best possible outcome. But that's the beauty of collective bargaining. It gives workers a much stronger voice and levels the playing field. And it's not just about wages. Unions also negotiate for things like healthcare benefits, retirement plans, and paid time off. They fight for safer working conditions, better training programs, and fair treatment for all workers. In short, they're looking out for the well-being of their members in every aspect of their working lives. Section 5, Uncle Sam weighs in labor laws. Now you might be thinking, hold on, isn't all this negotiation stuff regulated somehow? You bet it is. Just like any good game, there are rules to the whole labor union game, and the government is the referee. In the US of A, we've got laws like the National Labor Relations Act, which lays down the groundwork for unions and collective bargaining. This law gives workers the right to form unions, join them without fear of getting fired, and bargain collectively with their employers. But like any good rule book, it's had its fair share of revisions and interpretations over the years. Some folks argue that the laws are now tilted too far in favor of employers, making it harder for unions to organize and bargain effectively. It's a whole other can of worms, but the point is, the legal landscape plays a big role in how unions operate. And it's not just about forming unions. We've also got laws that set minimum wage standards, ensure safe working conditions, and prevent discrimination in the workplace. These laws work hand in hand with unions to protect workers' rights and promote fair labor practices. Section 6. Union victories, real-life examples. Alright, enough with the theory, let's talk about some real-life union wins. Because let's be honest, nothing illustrates the power of collective action like seeing it in action. Take the United Auto Workers for example. They've been fighting for auto workers' rights for decades, winning them decent wages, healthcare benefits, and retirement security. They've even taken on giant corporations like General Motors and Ford, proving that even David can stand up to Goliath. And how about the American Federation of Teachers? They've been instrumental in improving public education by fighting for better pay and working conditions for teachers. Because guess what? When teachers are treated well and paid fairly, everyone benefits. These are just a couple of examples among many. The point is, unions have a proven track record of achieving tangible improvements for workers across various industries. They're a force to be reckoned with, and their victories serve as a testament to the power of solidarity and collective action. Section 7. Why Unions Matter, a Worker's Perspective. Now, you might be thinking, okay, unions sound great for the workers who are in them, but what about me? Well, here's the thing. Even if you're not a union member yourself, chances are you've benefited from their efforts in some way. Think about it, when unions fight for better wages and benefits, it puts pressure on other employers to raise their standards too. Nobody wants to be the company with the worst pay and benefits, right? So, even non-union workers often see their own compensation and working conditions improve thanks to the ripple effect of union activity. But it's not just about the money. Unions also fight for things like workplace safety regulations, fair scheduling practices, and protection from discrimination. These are all things that benefit everyone, regardless of their union status. So whether you're a teacher, a construction worker, a barista, or a tech entrepreneur, remember that unions are out there fighting for a more just and equitable workplace for everyone. They're a vital part of a healthy economy and a fair society. Section 8. Unions around the world. Different strokes. Now, let's zoom out a bit and take a look at how unions operate in different parts of the world. Because believe it or not, the US isn't the only place with labor unions. In fact, they're a global phenomenon, each country with its own unique flavor. In some European countries like Sweden and Denmark, unions are incredibly powerful and have a huge influence on government policy. They're often involved in national-level negotiations over wages and working conditions, making sure that workers have a seat at the table when important decisions are being made. Then there are countries like China, where unions are tightly controlled by the government and often serve as an extension of the state rather than an independent voice for workers. It's a whole different ballgame, and it highlights the complex relationship between unions, governments, and employers around the world. The point is, there's no one-size-fits-all model for labor unions. Their structure, power, and relationship with other institutions vary greatly depending on the country and its historical context. But one thing remains constant. They all share the fundamental goal of representing workers' interests and fighting for better working conditions. Section 9. What the future holds. Unions and wages. So what does the future hold for labor unions and their impact on wages? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The truth is, it's hard to say for sure. The world of work is constantly evolving with new technologies, industries, and challenges emerging all the time. Some experts predict a decline in union membership as automation and globalization continue to reshape the labor market. Others argue that unions are more important than ever in an era of growing income inequality and precarious work arrangements. One thing's for sure, unions will need to adapt and evolve to remain relevant in the 21st century. They'll need to find new ways to organize workers in a rapidly changing economy and address the challenges posed by globalization and technological advancements. But if history has taught us anything, it's that workers are stronger when they stand together. As long as there are workplaces where people feel undervalued, underpaid, or unsafe, there will always be a need for unions to fight for their rights and ensure that everyone has a fair shot at a decent life.